In the United States, the 30th of October is an informal holiday in which children and teenagers participate in jokes, pranks, vandalism and parties. The night before Halloween is commonly referred to as Mischief, Cabbage or Devil's Night. Unfortunately, on the 30th of October 1975, in the prestigious gated community of Belhaven, Greenwich, Connecticut, the night would belong to the devil. The town of Belhaven in Greenwich, Connecticut is a highly sought-after residential area that offers a serene and tranquil lifestyle. The gated community is guarded by 24-hour security, is home to some of the most influential and prominent people, and is rarely affected by crime. The median house price within this private community exceeds $6 million. The centre of the town is the Belhaven Members Club, where residents enjoy catching up and socialising. The club offers activities and facilities which include tennis courts, swimming pools, a private beach and even sailing lessons for kids. Being consistently ranked as one of the wealthiest places to live in the United States, it is home to only 120 affluent families. The tight-knit community and the restricted one-way access provides residents with a feeling of confidence and safety. David Moxley was fortunate enough to relocate his wife Dorothy, daughter Martha, and son John to Belhaven in 1974. Mr. Moxley was a successful managing director for large accounting firm Touche Ross after joining the company in 1958. He was also a former director of the New York Public Library, New York City Opera, and the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Centennial Foundation. Mr. Moxley's wife, Dorothy, would spend her time fixing up the new home, cooking family meals, and sewing clothes for daughter Martha. Martha, 15, and her brother John, a couple years her senior, quickly settled into their new school, Greenwich High. John earned his place within the school's varsity football team, but it was Martha in particular who excelled. Martha made friends quickly and was described as having an outgoing and vivacious personality. After just 9 months, she was voted as the most popular girl in school within her yearbook. Martha was a good academic performer, excelled in a variety of sports, and was talented in arts. Those who knew Martha said she was kind, confident, and easy to get along with. She was upbeat, friendly, and was often surrounded by friends. Despite her popularity, she enjoyed spending precious hours with her family in the family home. Martha was good-natured, and her parents trusted her to make good decisions, saying that she was a responsible and level-headed girl. Martha was flourishing in her new hometown, and the future for her seemed promising. On Thursday the 30th of October 1975 at 6 p.m, Martha left her house to meet up with friends Jackie, Helen and Jeffrey. The group were jovial and participated in events associated with Mischief Night, Halloween Eve. Due to the amount of fun the group were having, the night quickly flew by. At 8:30 p.m, the group walked Jackie back to the head of her driveway as she had an early curfew to make. At 8:40 p.m, the group decided to go to Michael and Tommy Skakels' house, who were members of one of the wealthiest families in Belhaven. Together, the group listened to music within the Skakels family car on the driveway. At 9:10 p.m, Jeffrey walked Helen home, leaving just Michael, Tommy and Martha. Jimmy Tureen, the Skakels' cousin, who was also present, invited Tommy and Michael to his house. Tommy decided he wasn't going, and Michael asked Martha if she wanted to come with him. Martha declined and decided to stay with Tommy. At 9:30 p.m, Martha decided to head home. Saying goodbye to Tommy, she made the 150-yard walk back to her house through the Skakels' backyard. At 11:30 p.m, Dorothy Moxley woke up. Realising she'd fallen asleep, she went to see if Martha was home and in her room. After frantically checking the house, she realised Martha wasn't there and quickly began to phone everyone she knew. After speaking to one of Martha's friends, Dorothy was told that Martha was last seen with Tommy Skakel at the Skakel house. The Moxleys were good friends with the Skakels, and she immediately phoned to see if Martha was there. The Skakels were a large family consisting of Father Rushton and his 6 sons and 1 daughter. They were a prominent and very wealthy family and had relations to the Kennedys, with Rushton's sister Ethel being the widow of Robert F. Kennedy. 18-year-old Julie Skakel answered the phone and explained to Dorothy that Martha was no longer there. Dorothy was overwhelmed with anxiety and decided to go to the Skakels house at 1:15 a.m. Dorothy spoke with Tommy, and he explained he had last seen Martha at 9:30 p.m. when she left to head back home. At 3:35 a.m, and due to Mr. Moxley being away from home, Dorothy woke her son John, explaining that Martha was missing. John immediately got in his car to search the neighbourhood for Martha. At 3:48 a.m, Dorothy calls Greenwich police to report her daughter missing, and a patrol is sent out. Dorothy rushes around to the Skakels house once again at 4 a.m, and they all search the backyard where Martha would have made her route home, but unfortunately, no trace of Martha will be found. At 12 noon the following day, and still no sign of Martha, a friend of Dorothy's, Jean Walker, arrived at the Moxley residence to console her. Not long after, one of Martha's friends, Sheila Maguire, hysterically rushed into the house, reporting to have found Martha. She explained she was walking through the wooded area at the back of the Moxley property and had seen Martha under one of the pine trees. Jean Walker persuaded Dorothy to phone the police while she went to look. As Jean approached, she saw the lifeless body of Martha face down with her pants pulled down to her ankles. With her hair covered in blood and cold to the touch, Jean knew she was going to have to tell Dorothy her daughter was dead. Police arrived soon after and taped off the area. They began to collect evidence which included the head and partial shattered shaft of a 6-iron Tony Penny golf club, and blood spatter analysis revealed that Martha was initially attacked on her own driveway before being dragged to the back of the Moxley property. Police quickly began to collect witness statements from Martha's friends, with Tommy Skakels being brought in for a lengthy interview due to being the last known person to be seen with Martha. Martha's body was transported to hospital, and a medical examination would reveal the devastating injuries she had suffered. Martha's head and face had been bludgeoned, making her unrecognisable. Martha had received 9 to 14 blows from a blunt force object that was consistent with the partial remains of the golf club found at the crime scene. Some of the blows were so hard it pierced the skull and her brain. Martha had also received a post-mortem stab wound to her neck. This was concluded to be from the shaft of the golf club after the club broke in the attacker's hand. After the club was thrusted with such force, it dragged a lock of hair from one side of the neck to the other. A time of death estimation from the medical examination was established to be between 9:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. and coincided with Tommy's recollection of events of Martha leaving at 9:30 p.m. Police narrowed down the time of the attack to being between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. due to receiving numerous reports from neighbours of a dog frantically barking. Helen Fitzpatrick, a nearby neighbour, confirms that it was her dog and it was barking wildly. Dr. Henry Lee, one of the world's most renowned forensic scientists, analysed some of the case material. He states that there were no defence wounds, which indicates that she knew her attacker. Although this would appear true, due to the limited availability of reliable material, we cannot accurately say how the attack took place. By this, we mean we do not know if Martha was initially attacked face-on or was attacked by surprise from behind. A forensic anthropologist may be able to assist in determining which blow occurred first from analysing fracture patterns, although the damage to the skull may have been too extensive to provide a reliable estimation. We still do, however, believe that Martha likely knew her attacker due to the anger and rage projected onto her. Dr. Lee states, merely the fact that she was hit repeatedly with a golf club indicates some kind of rage, which personalises this thing, which indicates that there was such anger that the two had to have known each other, that it was a crime of passion. Dr. Lee also believes the attack was sexually motivated due to the blood smears being found between the legs, although a medical examination would find no evidence of a sexual assault. A criminal profile carried out by the FBI suggested an offender between the ages of 14 to 18 years old who resided within easy walking distance to the victim's residence, in the same socio-economic status as the victim, had regular interactions with the victim, had experienced behavioural problems at home and at school, had a drink or drug problem. spent solitary periods out late at nights pursuing fantasies, window peeping, or brooding about their perceived inequities. They go on to state the following: the way the offender resorted to violence suggests an immaturity that left him inadequately equipped to effectively deal with the victim on an emotional or intellectual level equivalent to the victim. The choice of weapon is not one normally associated with violence. Its use is strongly indicative of impulsiveness, immaturity, and a lack of experience in violent crime. The amount of blows to the victim's head is characterised as overkill, with any one of the blows being sufficient enough for death. This is strongly indicative of anger and rage directed in a very personal way to the victim. Again, after the club snapped, the shaft was stabbed into the victim's neck, suggesting the rage of the offender was not finished. The choice of body disposal site is indicative of someone who knows the area well. It is a considerable distance from the major attack site and subjected the killer to a much greater possibility of being observed whilst moving the body. The killer had to know the location of the tree and the cover it provided. The police investigation was also moving forward, and the Tony Penner Golf Club was successfully traced back to the Skakels house. The clubs had been passed down to 18-year-old Julie Skakels after the passing of Rushton's wife in 1973. Although a strong lead, it was established that the clubs were often left within the backyard, providing anyone with easy access. Due to the extensive police questioning, a list of possible suspects were put forward. 26-year-old Ed Hammond, a next-door neighbour of the Moxleys, was considered a prime suspect. Ed's father had passed away a few years earlier, and Ed was said to have taken the death very hard. Ed became withdrawn and had started drinking heavily. Neighbours had reported strange interactions they had had with him to the police. One neighbour explained how she saw Ed trying to enter her property, and once Ed realised the neighbour had seen him, he ran away. Another neighbour was approached by Ed, where he commented on watching her sunbathe within her garden. Police carried out a search warrant at Ed's house and took 5 full trash bags of potential evidence. From the window of Ed's room, they noted that he had the perfect view of the site Martha was attacked. Although no evidence could link Ed to Martha's murder, the police still suspected him of committing the crime. 23-year-old Ken Littleton, the Skakels family live-in tutor and carer, was also considered a prime suspect. Those in the Skakels household told investigators that Kenneth went outside at 9:45 p.m. to investigate a noise and didn't return until 11 p.m. Kenneth Littleton was put under further suspicion when his mental health had started to deteriorate soon after Martha's murder. He developed a series of substance abuse issues, was hospitalised for an attempted suicide, and was convicted for a nearby burglary. Police performed a polygraph test on Ken, to which he failed. However, without any solid evidence, they were unable to make an arrest. 17-year-old Tommy Skakels was questioned on multiple occasions due to being the last known person to see Martha alive. He stuck to his original story that he said goodbye to Martha at his back door at 9:30 p.m. After he witnessed Martha scurry across the backyard, he went to complete a school assignment and started to watch a TV show with Ken Littleton at 10:30 p.m. Ken Littleton confirmed these events, which also provided an alibi for himself as well as Tommy. Ken explained that Tommy seemed completely normal and relaxed that evening, which would be abnormal if he had just carried out a brutal attack. Due to the questioning and the Skakels' famous relations with the Kennedys, the media went into a frenzy. Rushton Skakels hired a group of lawyers and stopped all cooperation with the police soon after. Among these suspects were a large number of others, which included a transient of the interstate, a Belhaven neighbour who was seen taking a stroll around the time Martha was allegedly murdered, a young man who had occasionally given Martha a ride home from school, a man who had installed drapes at the Moxley house, a Belhaven man who had chased some youths off his property with a golf club, a part-time gardener who had landscaped for 2 Belhaven properties, and a man whose neighbours claimed had a section of a broken golf club at his house. Police lacked any solid evidence, and by the late 1970s, the case would unfortunately go cold. The Skakels family would continue to receive scrutiny from the media and their community. To clear the family's name, Rushton Skakels decided to hire a private investigator. The investigators re-examined the crime and documented their findings in the report known as the Sutton Report. The report would not be made public until 1998, 23 years after Martha's murder. It would contain crucial evidence that would help decipher the actual events that occurred on the night of the 30th of October 1975. From now on, we will refer to the private investigators as Sutton. Ken Littleton was re-questioned by Sutton on his recollection of events on the night Martha was murdered. Greenwich police had initially questioned Ken on the whereabouts of Tommy that evening, as they had circumstantial evidence that suggested Tommy was out of the house at the time the murder was committed. Ken Littleton had given a statement of truth to the police confirming this. However, he later refused to sign the statement on the grounds that he believed Tommy was innocent. He had also indicated to seeing Michael Skakels outside on the night of the murder. However, when pressed on the question by Sutton if he had seen Michael outside, he replied no. Sutton asked, "Well, would you tell me if you did?" Ken also replied no. Ken Littleton told Sutton that he was certain the murder was committed after 10:30 p.m. that evening. Sutton asked him, "How do you know?" "Because," Ken replied. After Ken Littleton's questioning, Sutton was sure he was holding something back, and he was purposely failing to disclose everything he knows about the events that occurred on the 30th of October 1975. Tommy Skakels was interviewed by Sutton on his recollection of events with Martha the night she was murdered. Shockingly, it was found that Tommy had failed to disclose important details in his first interview with Greenwich police. He had now told Sutton that he had spent an additional 20 minutes with Martha, engaging in a sexual encounter within his backyard. Those at the Skakels house confirmed witnessing obvious flirtations between Martha and Tommy that evening. Tommy still stated that he said goodbye to Martha after this interaction and witnessed her cross the rear lawn to make her way home. Tommy was psychologically and medically reviewed by Dr. Stanley Lessay, Dr. M. Hale and Dr. Grammont. Tommy's medical record suggested that he may be suffering from an organic neurological problem, which could result in violent outbursts. At age 4, Tommy sustained a head injury from an automobile accident and was hospitalised for 2 weeks. Following the accident, there were immediate changes in Tommy's personality. He became impulsive, was prone to outbursts of anger, and generally did not appear to be as happy as he was prior to the accident. Dr. Lessay reported that Tommy was a problematic and unruly child that was affected by his mother's early death and his father's frequent absence. Tommy's psychological tests showed a level of immaturity, impulsiveness, erratic behaviour, low self-esteem, depression, and an inability to adjust to the demands and responsibilities of adolescence. Michael Skakels was not considered a suspect by Greenwich police, as he was not at the Skakels house at the time it was believed Martha was murdered. Michael had told the police he had left the Skakels house with brother John Skakels and cousin Jimmy Tureen at 9:30 p.m. to go to the Tureen house and didn't return until 11 p.m. Sutton spoke to Andrea Shakespeare, a close friend of Julie Skakels, who was present at the Skakels residence on the 30th of October 1975. When asked about Michael, she said she was almost certain that Michael did not go to the Tureens that evening, stating that she saw Michael well after John and Jimmy had left. Sutton re-interviewed John Skakels, who had previously told Greenwich police Michael went with him and Jimmy to the Tureen house. Under hypnosis, Sutton, on repeat occasions, tried to get John to place Michael in the car and then at the Tureens. John could not. As much as the interviewer persisted, hinted and pushed, John could not identify that Michael was there, and even stated that he felt Michael was back at the Skakels house. Sutton decided to speak with Michael directly, and like his brother Tommy, he disclosed some strange and interesting details that differed from his original story. Michael tells Sutton that he snuck out of his house that evening at 11:40 p.m. to window peep on a neighbourhood woman, and had done this previously on several occasions. After leaving the outside of her residence, he went over to Martha Moxley's bedroom window and made an effort to contact her by calling out her name. after his efforts proved unsuccessful, he carried out a self-sexual act in a tree. He went to the wooded area at the back of Martha's property where her body would eventually be found, and stated that he felt someone else's presence before quickly returning home. Like Tommy, Sutton decided to psychologically evaluate Michael and look into his medical records. A psychological report conducted on Michael by Dr. Sue Wellington Quinlan showed the severe magnitude of psychological and emotional problems in which he suffered. Dr. Quinlan wrote in respects to Michael, "Severe agitated depression, a sense of being overwhelmed by a sense of evil and futility of life. The depression is probably of psychotic proportions, with a fragile capacity for mental functioning. Intrusions of personal concerns into intellectual functioning, primitive fantasy content with mutilated bodies, mass-distorted figures, concerns about bodily integrity and deformity. Inadequate capacity for attachment to other people with a marginally adequate impulse control. All symptoms evident of pathological borderline features." Dr. Quinlan adds, "Under conditions of increasing depression or with an increase of overt hostility or social withdrawal, there could be a possibility of self-destructive behaviour." This self-destructive behaviour would show itself in 1978 when Michael was involved in a drunken high-speed chase by the police. Michael ended up crashing the car into a telephone pole, nearly killing his passenger, Debbie Dell, a friend of the Skakels. Due to his family's influence, Michael escaped a sentence, but was commissioned to attend Elan Behavioural School at Poland Springs in Maine. Both Michael and Tommy were known to share the same psychological and behavioural problems and were known in the neighbourhood as troublesome. The history of alcoholism within the Skakel family is also evident, with Michael stating that he became a full-blown daily drinking alcoholic by the time he was 13. Sutton then interviewed Julie Skakel. Before she gave Andrea Shakespeare a lift home that evening, she recalls seeing Martha and Tommy at the back door and Ken Littleton in the kitchen. When she arrives back home at 9:50 p.m, she explains hearing a noise within the bushes of the driveway and sees a crouched, dark hooded male figure with something in his left hand moving underneath the kitchen windows, then going into the trees on the other end of the driveway. Although Julie recalled it as odd, she attributed it to Mischievous Night, the night before Halloween. Although Julie's thoughts are reasonable, we also have to presume the likelihood of it being the killer. Interestingly, Julie recalls seeing Ken Littleton in the kitchen as she walks in, and to some degree, we can also presume Tommy is still in the backyard with Martha at this point. The only person who is unaccounted for is Michael. Sutton decided to examine Martha's diary. Within were multiple entries that suggested a romantic interest towards her. That person was Tommy Skakel. Martha's friends would tell Sutton that Tommy wanted to date Martha, but his advances were not always welcomed. Due to witnesses, it is fairly certain that Tommy was making out with Martha on the night of the murder. Could Martha have rejected further advances made by Tommy that sent him into a fit of rage? Possibly. However, Tommy wasn't the only romantic interest suggested within Martha's diary. The other person was Michael Skakel. According to Martha's friends, and along the blurred lines of teenage liaisons, Michael was known to be Martha's boyfriend for some time. In 1995, a Sutton Report employee leaked the files to investigative journalist Dunn and Leonard Levitt. Levitt's articles disclosed the contents of the Sutton Report. Dunn provided a copy to former Los Angeles police detective Mark Furman, who was at the heart of the O.J. Simpson trial. Furman published the book Murder in Greenwich in 1998, which mentioned who they believed to have committed the murder. A new police investigation was launched from the widespread publicity the book had caused, and Michael Skakel was arrested on January 19, 2000. He was initially charged as a minor due to being 15 years old at the time of Martha's death. However, in February 2001, a judge ordered Skakel to be tried as an adult, stating that the juvenile system wasn't equipped to punish a defendant who was nearly 40 years old. Skakels' trial began at Bridgeport Superior Court in May 2002, where he was represented by Michael Sherman, a well-regarded attorney. Although there were no eyewitnesses or forensic evidence linking Skakels to the murder, the prosecution relied on the circumstantial evidence. Many classmates also came forward from Elam Behavioural School, testifying that Michael had confessed to murdering Martha. One individual states that Michael had said, "I'm going to get away with murder because I'm a Kennedy." Another conversation with a classmate testified that Michael didn't know whether he did it, that he may have done it, he didn't know what happened. Eventually, he came to the conclusion that he did do it, he must have done it. The prosecution's hypothesis of what occurred on the 30th of October 1975 is as follows. Martha had changed the focus of her affections from one brother to another in a very public, and for Michael, certainly humiliating way. Michael was without doubt extremely upset about what was transpiring in front of him. Michael would have been in turmoil that evening as he watched Martha and Tommy's romantic interest unfold. Michael would have become highly suspicious when Martha rejected his invitation to the Tureens' house, as he knew she would have been left alone with Tommy. The overwhelming urge to spy on them would have been overbearing, and his head would have been spinning in anxiety, anger, hurt, helplessness and jealousy. It is thought that Michael headed to the bushes in the back garden to see what they were up to. He was desperate to see Martha leave for her home, but instead watched his brother and Martha make out and fool around for 20 minutes. Michael likely snapped into a fit of rage as he grabbed the nearest weapon to follow Martha home. Although many people believe Ken Littleton and Tommy Skakels knew about what Michael had done, it has never been proven. Ken Littleton testified in court, providing him immunity. He mentioned how Michael Skakels was a terror and recalled a time when he witnessed Michael bludgeon a rabbit in the backyard with a golf club. 27 years after Martha's death, on the 7th of June 2002, a jury found Michael Skakels guilty for the murder of Martha Moxley after 4 days of deliberation. Michael was sentenced to 20 years to life at 41 years of age. Michael Skakels then began a series of appeals through the Connecticut and federal courts. In 2010, he filed a state petition claiming he had received ineffective counsel, which would be revised 3 times. Within the petition, it was claimed that there were failures to adequately investigate several other suspects, including Tommy Skakels, a failure to provide expert testimony about the destructive nature of Elan's school, and a failure to locate a potential independent witness who could place Michael at the Tureen house. After reviewing the case, Judge Thomas Bishop at Holland Superior Court agreed with Skakels' petition after finding enough evidence to suggest Skakels had received ineffective counsel. Bishop wrote that Dennis Osorio, a disinterested and credible witness, had a clear recollection of seeing Michael Skakels at the Tureen house on the evening of Martha's murder. Others at Elam Behavioural School argued that the statements Michael had made regarding the murder of Martha could not be taken at face value. They said the teachers ridiculed and constantly accused Michael of committing the murder. When Michael denied being involved, they would dish out punishment until he would express doubt about his innocence. On the 21st of November 2013, Skakels was released from prison on a $1.2 million bail. On the 30th of December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reversed Judge Bishop's decision, claiming that Skakels' representation was not so deficient that it warranted a new trial. The witness reporting to have seen Michael at the Tureens' house only provided a partial alibi. There was credible evidence that suggested Michael murdered Martha after 11 p.m, even though it was initially suspected the murder occurred earlier. After another hearing on the 4th of May 2018, the court sided with Skakels and vacated his conviction once again. The state petitioned the US Supreme Court to hear an appeal, but the court declined to take up the issue. On the 30th of October 2020, 45 years to the day of Martha's death, prosecutors dismissed the charge against Skakels. Chief State's Attorney Richard Colangelo said a retrial was not possible. Key witnesses were now dead, too much time had elapsed, and there was no additional evidence to test. As of today, Michael Skakels is 63 years of age, walks around a free man, and is able to live his life without restrictions. In December 2023, he filed a civil rights lawsuit in state court against the town of Greenwich, seeking compensation for his wrongful conviction. In 2016, Robert F. Kennedy, Michael's cousin, published the book Framed: Why Michael Skakels Spent Over a Decade in Prison for a Murder He Didn't Commit. The book addresses the bad police work conducted by Greenwich police and Skakels' inadequate defence. Within the book, Robert F. Kennedy draws attention to two males who were in the town of Greenwich that night, who he suspects of committing the murder. Interestingly, Kennedy claims to have spoken to Tony Bryant, cousin of Kobe Bryant, who was friends with the two individuals in question. Tony explains that the two individuals would frequently travel from the Bronx, New York to Greenwich. The two friends had boasted about committing a murder that night and had used a golf club grabbed from a backyard. We believe the police's mistakes throughout this investigation resulted in the failure to secure a conviction. Police had provided too much focus on the dogs barking to estimate the time the attack had occurred. It is now believed Martha could have been attacked after 11 p.m, as there is considerable evidence she arrived back home but then left again when she saw Dorothy asleep. Witnesses in the Skakels house also report to hearing Martha laugh at the back of their property after 11 p.m. Police failed to secure a search warrant at the Skakels house. They were invited in for a look around by Rushton Skakels. However, this was on a friendly basis and no evidence was taken. Valuable forensic evidence was lost or damaged from the inexperienced management of the crime scene. We ask ourselves these questions when assessing the guilt of Michael Skakels. Did Michael have access to the murder weapon? Yes. Did Michael have a possible motive? Yes. Was Michael obsessed with Martha? His actions suggest so. Did Michael lie to detectives? Yes. Did Michael fit the offender's profile? Yes. Was the prosecution's hypothesis reasonable? Yes. Does this make him a murderer? Not necessarily. Could he have been the murderer? Yes. Could he be innocent? Yes. Although the circumstantial evidence within this case is compelling, we believe that it doesn't show guilt beyond all reasonable doubt, and more substantial evidence is needed. Both Dorothy and John Moxley still believe Michael to be the murderer, but to this day, the case remains legally unsolved. The truth is, the exact events that occurred on the fateful night of the 30th of October 1975 may never be revealed. Please comment your thoughts on what you believe to be the truth, and please like and subscribe for more.